So we've just done part 1 of this video on the Kalam Cosmological Argument. This is from William Lane Craig. Again, I don't know how direct this is. I don't know if this is someone else summarizing it or if he wrote the script for these to be done by a voiceover or whatever, but it is from one of his YouTube channels. So this is from him. And just to remind you, this is what was given to me when it was requested by someone who said, yes, this is the definitive Kalam Cosmological Argument. Can you respond to it? Well, actually, this is the one he sent. He sent me part 2, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to do part 2, I want to do part 1 first. And I looked around again for a part 3. I still didn't see one, so I think this is it. Part 1, if you recall, was on the scientific argument, and we went over the basic syllogism for the Kalam Cosmological Argument, and their scientific reasons for it, and why they're a bunch of crap. This one is about the philosophical argument, so we'll see if it fares any better.
Did the universe have a beginning? Or has it existed from eternity past?
And the answer is, we don't know. I covered this last time. People say the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. It might have been. It might be all there is to it. There might have been something before it, like a collapsing universe, or some other kind of hyperdimensional realm or whatever. We just don't know. As far as we can tell, the Big Bang is the beginning of time. So the idea of it being a beginning as in a start, as in a creation, as in you have some time going on, and then something happens to create the universe, and then you have the universe. It really doesn't look like that. What we see is that the Big Bang is the start of time. Which is a problem if you want to push in God. But, again, we don't know whether or not there might be something else to it.
If it did have a beginning, this raises a question. Did the universe have a creator?
And as I covered, having a beginning doesn't necessarily mean that. There are all sorts of theories for how some pre-existing thing could have caused the universe naturally, like a collapsing former universe, or a collision of membranes in a 11-dimensional hyperspace, as M-theory says. There's all sorts of possibilities. We don't know of any way to test any of them, God or otherwise. But it should be pointed out that God is not on equal footing of those. Because, just Occam's razor, God is the most immense, complex, and improbable thing that you would really have to ask the question of how could such a being ever exist? And of course their response is, well, he always existed. Well, okay, why can't that apply to anything else? You can't get around the problems by saying that your God always existed while saying that nothing else can do that. Oh, what does M-theory says about this place? Where did it come from? Well, maybe it was always there. Oh, you don't get to do that. Well, you just did. You just did.
In part 1, we explored this question scientifically.
Badly.
Now let's look at it philosophically. Aristotle believed the universe was eternal in the past. But Al-Ghazali disagreed. He pointed out that if the universe did not have a beginning, then the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. But that's a problem, because the existence of an actually infinite number of past events leads to absurdity. It's metaphysically impossible. Why?
Okay, they're going to tell us why. This is new. No one's ever done this before.
Mathematician David Hilbert illustrates the problem by imagining a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all of which are occupied. There's not a single vacancy.
Okay, yeah, we all know about Hilbert. If you don't know about Hilbert Hotel, I'll put a link below. But yeah, Hilbert Hotel is a paradox of infinity. It shows that infinity is not a discrete quantity, and you can't treat it like any normal discrete number. And he does that by showing, oh, you got an infinite number of people in the room, but you can still put one in just by adding one to everyone else, or you can fit another infinite number of people in by putting all the original people in even-numbered rooms and the new and odd-numbered rooms, and so on. He shows how the set of infinity works differently than it does for discrete numbers. So yeah, I'm going to skip this. They go on for a while about it.
These absurdities show that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist in the real world.
No, that's not what it shows at all. It just describes the nature of infinity. It's a veridical paradox. It's something that appears to be contradictory and weird, but it's provably true. That's the part they don't tell you about. This is provably true. This is actually how it works. So what they're apparently going to say now is that this has no application in the real world, and actually it does in many different places, but let's see what they say.
Here is a second argument Ghazali offers against a past eternal universe. Suppose that for every one orbit Saturn completes around the Sun, Jupiter completes 2. The longer they orbit, the further Saturn falls behind. Now, what if these 2 planets have always been orbiting the Sun from eternity past? Which has completed the most orbit? Strangely enough, the number of their orbits is exactly the same, infinity. But that seems absurd, for the longer they orbit, the greater the difference becomes.
I mean, that might seem absurd to us, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And this is the same thing we saw in the first video. It doesn't make sense to us, therefore it must not be true, therefore we'll just shoehorn in God and call it a day. That is not how you advance knowledge. That is how you remove yourself from the set of people who can advance the knowledge of humanity.
If the universe has always existed, then an infinite series of past events has been formed by adding one event after another. It's like a sequence of dominoes, falling one after another until the last domino, today, is reached.
Well, today isn't the last domino, but...
The problem is that the final domino could never fall if an infinite number of dominoes had to fall first. So today could never be reached. But obviously, here we are. It's today. So the number of events leading up to today could not possibly be infinite.
See, this is just the kind of thing you ordinarily don't get to see. You see me after I've gone through all this, and after I've gone through all of the thought and all of the reactions and everything to put it down to something coherent. You don't see reactions like the one I just showed you, where, just out of the blue, they said something so mind-bogglingly stupid that even I couldn't have predicted. Did Craig write this? I've never heard Craig say this. I've heard Craig say a lot of dumb things, like he has his really dopey version of the Hilbert Hotel, which is a library with an infinite number of books. It's dumb. But this, if we are just one domino in an infinite time stream, then there will be an infinite number of dominoes that lead up to us and an infinite number of dominoes that follow after us. Of course, as we said in part 1, time doesn't work that way, but we'll go with it. They're saying it's impossible for our domino to fall because there's an infinite amount of time to reach it. But you could say that equally of any other domino. And yet there would have to be some domino that's falling. There would have to be some domino it's reached. So why not this one? It kind of reminds me of that illustration that people do with cards. Like when a creationist says something like, oh, this sort of thing is just incredibly improbable to this insane amount, therefore it couldn't possibly have happened and evolution is wrong and we're all special creations of God. And so what you do is you look at a deck of cards and it's a new deck of cards and they're all in order, you know, spades, ace to king, and then hearts and diamonds. And you say if you were to randomly shuffle to that sequence, that would be almost impossible. Every human who ever existed could shuffle cards once every second from the beginning of the universe until the heat death of the universe, and not once ever encounter that sequence. Then what you do is you shuffle the cards, you show the random sequence, you show that that random sequence is just as unlikely. It's just as unlikely, and yet it happened. Because every single random sequence of cards is exactly as unlikely as all of the others. And yet you are going to come up with some random sequence of cards. One of those was going to show up. And you could shuffle cards from now until the universe's heat death and never run into that same sequence again. But you got it that time because you were always going to get one. It's these kinds of things like, this is a level of stupid that I can't fix. If you thought that there was anything to this argument, then I'm sorry, I don't know what to do for you.
The infinite is nowhere to be found in reality.
Oh, that's wrong. We know that is wrong. That is so wrong. You know, I mentioned in yesterday's video that I might be talking about the Casimir effect again. And I didn't because I can never predict these things. It would have been something I could have done in a scripted video where I do some foreshadowing, or even just one that I had watched before. But now the foreshadowing is going to pay off in this one, even though it's completely unscripted and I'm watching this cold. Yeah, I'm going to have to look at it now. The Casimir effect is where you measure the vacuum energy of the universe by having two plates that are close together, and the vacuum energy outside of the plates is greater than that inside. The reason why it works that way is because the plates are so close together that all those little virtual particles I mentioned that are constantly zipping in and out of existence, they're all waves. You know, in quantum mechanics, particles are waves, waves are particles, are kind of the same thing. They have a wavelength. What you're doing is in between the two plates, you are restricting the only particles to be, I believe it's a multiple of half the wavelength. If I remember correctly, you can have a particle with a wavelength of 0.5, of 1, of 1.5, of 2, relative to the distance between the plates. There's still an infinite number of particles there, because vacuum energy is infinite. You get infinite 0-point energy, and that's happening all around you all the time. But what you're doing is you're restricting that infinity inside the plates. So you go 0.51, 1.52. That's a countable infinity. The Hilbert Hotel thing is working with a countable infinity. You also have uncountable infinities. Think of all the real numbers between 0 and 1. You've got 0.5, 0.25, 0.125, 0.000001285, whatever. Any two numbers you can find in that sequence has a number in between. Then you look at those two numbers and there's another number in between. And you can divide them down as much as you can and never hit any sort of countable sequence. That's an uncountable infinity, and it is greater than a countable infinity. So the Casimir effect works because the infinity of particles inside the two plates, in between them, is less than the infinity of particles outside the two plates, and so you get a pressure pushing inward. That's how it works. I mean, you have infinities showing up all over the place at the Big Bang, at the center of a black hole. In quantum field theory, there are all sorts of infinities. For example, when you look at the self-energy of electrons and photons and quarks, each of those is going to interact with its own electromagnetic field. That means they have infinite self-energy. And that's something they have to deal with in quantum field theory. They do it with a process called renormalization, which gives them back literal numbers and gives them a good way of working with it. But yeah, we have quantum fields. We even have something called Hilbert space. Why do you think it's called Hilbert space? Yes, it's an infinite dimensional vector space. The harmonic oscillator is a good example of that. And by the way, this conceptual gap is what is gotten in the way of scientists figuring out a quantum theory of gravity, because they have all sorts of infinities that show up that they need to figure out. And they don't all renormalize. That's a problem. I should say that's a problem for our theory of how the universe works, not a problem with the universe itself. The universe is going to do what it does, and like I said in the last video, it is under no obligation to behave in a way that makes sense to humans.
It neither exists in nature, nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought.
Both of those are false, and Hilbert's Hotel actually demonstrates that the latter is false.
The role that remains for the infinite to play
is solely that of an idea.
Yeah, this is way taken out of context. And this is what they do. This is what they did. They did it in the last video, they did it in this one. Do I take the time to do this? See, ordinarily, I would take the time to look up this quote, figure out exactly where it comes from. I didn't do that in the last video. Let me do an edit and see if I can figure this out. See, I'm searching and I'm finding all sorts of places that quote it. I'm having trouble finding an actual reference to it. Okay, I did find a reference, and I followed the reference, and the reference is someone else quoting Hilbert. This is not a good sign. I found one that claims it has it, but is behind a paywall. This gets so frustrating, I'm telling you. If I knew it was going to take this long, I would have just stopped recording while I did it. Oh my god, 15 minutes I've been trying to figure this. I can't square this with the same David Hilbert of Hilbert Space. I mean, if this was something he said like back in the, early 1900s before quantum mechanics, that would make sense. Or if it's a paper that's just talking about, like his hotel, as an abstract thought that could not exist in reality, but it's a good way of thinking about infinity. Because Hilbert was primarily a mathematician and only secondarily a physicist. Yeah, I'm seeing one here that says he said it in 1925. So yeah, this would definitely be before he started working with Heisenberg and Schrödinger and all of that. And Hilbert is the one who's responsible for really bringing a formalized mathematics into quantum mechanics. Instead of all these, seemingly goofy theories that they had that they couldn't really contextualize mathematically. Hilbert is the reason why they could do that. But again, this is what these people do. They take something out of context. They don't tell you anything about it, and they make it look like his opinion was something other than what he was. So that's something else you really shouldn't fall for.
What objections might be raised to these arguments?
Oh, lots. Who wants to bet they haven't covered anything I said?
Some people object that, unlike the rooms in Hilbert's hotel, the events of the past don't all exist at the same time. But we can easily tweak the story to get rid of this objection. Suppose the hotel has been under construction from eternity past, one room being added each year. How many rooms would there now be in the hotel? An actual infinite number. So if the past is infinite, that would imply that Hilbert's hotel could exist, which is absurd.
Again, why? Why is it absurd? You can't just say it's absurd. It sounds absurd to us, but yes, if you had an infinite amount of time, you could build an infinitely large hotel.
Others have objected that an actually infinite number of things do exist, namely numbers and other mathematical entities.
No one is saying that those things actually exist. They're concepts that we overlay on the universe. The infinities that actually exist are the things that I mentioned, like the infinities in quantum field theory.
However, this objection presupposes that numbers really exist.
No, it's just a straw man. You're making another straw man. Cut it out.
But this is a highly disputed assumption that most philosophers reject.
And physicists reject it too. So stop putting it into their mouths.
So if Ghazali's two arguments are right, then the universe is not eternal in the past. It must have a beginning.
Why don't you look at what all of the best physicists and theoreticians have said in the last 100 years? Why do you have to keep... have you even used a single source from the last century? Even your Hilbert quote was from literally a century ago. If one of the references I found is to be believed, it's 1925, and here we are in 2025. Got anything more recent? Because we've learned a thing or two since then.
And we know intuitively that whatever begins to exist requires a cause of its existence.
You don't know anything intuitively. Intuition is not a source of knowledge. But again, that's what they want you to do. They want you to take these little mental heuristics that our little monkey brains have evolved in order to be able to survive in just the world around us, and try to apply it in these places that they never evolved to act in. Intuitively, we learn to work by discrete quantities, because everything around us operates in discrete quantities. When did primitive man ever have to deal with a black hole, or quantum field theory, or anything like that? When did they ever have to deal with an electron referencing its own electromagnetic field? They didn't. Your intuition is only about things that helped you survive in nature. And so that's how they can manipulate you, because it can really cause stress when you're having to deal with something counterintuitive. And trying to deal with that is something you really want to avoid, because we really want to find the simple heuristic that lets us just get the thing done. And that is exactly what religion exploits. And here's the proof of it. They just said, oh, we intuitively know it, therefore we really know it.
Thus, we are led to conclude that the universe has a cause of its existence.
Except when we examine it logically and rationally, looking at the evidence, we realize we don't know any such thing. The universe may not have a cause at all. The idea of the universe having a cause might be completely invalid. Because if we look at the moment of the Big Bang, at all of the things we think are absurd, and we consider that what if they're not absurd at all? What if it's just a normal point in space-time like any other? Which there are mathematical models that make it exactly that. Then there's no validity whatsoever to the concept of the universe having a beginning or an end. It just is.
So what caused the universe? Atheist Daniel Dennett says, the universe caused itself.
God, this music is loud.
Because in order to cause itself to come into existence, the universe would have to exist before it existed.
Okay, see, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. They're just stuck in linear time, or they hope that you're stuck in linear time. And they didn't even try to understand what Dennett was saying. Now, I don't know exactly, I haven't read Dennett saying this exactly, but there are plenty of theories about the universe being a self-cause. But you see, these are developed by physicists to understand that time doesn't work the way you think it does. Like I explained in the last video, it's not this linear progression of cause and effect. It's something that gets warped by gravity. Einstein proved that. It's something that has all these weird properties during the inflationary period. It may be that the universe doesn't have an infinite space and instead is curved around on itself like a donut. And we'd be like living on the surface of the donut, but you have to add 1 to all the dimensions, or we can have a 3-dimensional space. Well, if that's the case, and a lot of physicists think it might be, then it also might be the case that time, just being another dimension, is wrapped around in a similar fashion. That would mean that the universe is completely self-contained and is completely its own cause. And this is something else in a scripted video I could actually look up and research. I'm not going to do it right now. I wasted enough time trying to chase down that Hilbert quote. Oh god, yeah, I've been going for an hour now. Fortunately, I'm almost at the end of this, but yeah, Brandolini's Law strikes again. We'll see what I can edit this down to.
The cause of the universe must therefore be outside of the universe.
Again, not only is there no evidence of that, there's not even any indication that the concept makes any sense. Because the universe is all of space-time. How do you have something outside of space-time? Outside would mean there's another space to be in. So what is that space? It's not that such an idea is impossible. Scientists have ideas for what it might be, but we have no way of knowing what it might be, no way of testing it, and certainly no reason to elevate your theory based on nothing except a sex manual from a bunch of Bronze Age goat herders who formed a death cult. No other reason to think that it is what you think it is. Show us the mathematics of God and heaven and everything else, and then maybe it'll be a theory that we can look at. But until then, how do you even pretend to be able to play in the same space as M-theory or loop quantum gravity or any of these others when you don't even have any math to back you up? You're not even on their level. You're not even on their level.
Spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and enormously powerful. Much like God.
Okay, yeah, so it ends the way the last one ends, yeah. And same objection, how can it be powerful if it's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial? That doesn't make any... Show us an equation for God's power, because all the equations we have for power are based on energy and matter and being able to move mass and have kinetic energy and all of these other things, even down on the quantum level. And by the way, notice they say enormously powerful. What did they not say? What do Christians believe God is in regards to how powerful he is that they didn't say here? They always say God is infinitely powerful. Well, they just spent a whole video trying to convince us that infinity was a ridiculous concept that couldn't actually exist because it's paradoxical. It would kind of be obvious if they said infinitely powerful. So in this one case, they didn't, because they're trying to avoid that. But if there can't be infinite time, then how can God be eternal? If there can't be infinite space, how can God be everywhere? And if there can't be infinite energy, then how can God be infinitely powerful? That's the problem, and it's just special pleading again. You just have to say, well, God is just different because he's different because he is. Because that's how we want it to be. And that's all they have. That's all they ever have. It's just manipulation. And the good news is all you have to do is stop falling for it. And you can set your mind free. And that's the start of setting your mind free from everything else just like it that uses all of these same manipulative tactics to deceive you and oppress you, including politics of all kinds. Free your mind from this, and you truly start seeing why this is wrong, and then you stop believing things that are said by Democrats and Republicans or conservatives, liberals, socialists, whoever, because it's all the same load of crap. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the Comic God, shares for the Share Throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, donate.bogosity.tv keeps me doing what I do for as long as I do it. I've been doing, oh my God. Yeah, this is going to have to be edited down. I just looked over at the recording time. Yeah. So much work involved. So much more work would be involved if I did this as a normal video and I actually took the time to try and chase down all these references. So please do that. One-time donations or by becoming a regular supporter. Get these videos early and ad-free, and also other special perks like the AMA, which I'm going to work on next because it's the start of the month. And some of my supporters have asked me some questions. I got to go through and look through those and answer those. That'll be up next. But you can already go ahead and ask a question for next month. So please check that out. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, as always, as I always want you to be, as I just pointed out what you can do with this video to free yourself, free your mind from the yoke of religion and government and everything else, is to please stay strong and be free.